Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to learn how to paint a cardinal in a snow scene based on this reference photo. And as you can see, there are a lot of tiny branches in the reference photo, and we're going to greatly simplify the reference photo. So we are only going to keep some of the main branches so that the painting has some structures. And as for the rest of the branches, we are going to blur them out. Just imagine that you are retaking this photo with the focus on the bird, and the distant branches become out of focus and blurry. So for today's painting, we're mainly going to use ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, raw umber, and for the bird, the local color will be cadmium red, and I will darken it with alizarin crimson and some green. And I accidentally used 2 transparent greens, you only need 1. And here is a list of other materials. I'm using a masking fluid pen, so if you are using a bottle of masking fluid, just use a separate brush for applying masking fluid. So in tackling this painting, first we will do our preparation, which is pencil drawing, applying masking fluid, and wetting the paper. And then in terms of actual painting, we will proceed from the background to the branches, and then finally the cardinal. And then we will end with adjustment of details if necessary. For the pencil drawing, first we are going to determine the position of the cardinal in the painting. I think the reference photo is already good in terms of composition. It's in the left third. So I am going to first determine where the bird is and see whether it will fit everything, whether the size is good enough. And then I will draw the position of the main branches I want to focus on. And in determining which branches to include among all these branches, my main thinking is whether the composition will be interesting. I don't want too many parallel lines. Of course, I'm going to include the one that the bird is perching on and the large curving branches, because that's also part of the focal point. And as for the others, I am not even going to draw out, even though later in the painting process I will paint some of them. But currently I'm only drawing out the most important branches. I am happy with the composition, so now I am going to apply darker line for the bird so that I can see the shape better. After drawing out the bird, I think it is a better idea to include this branch as well. Now I'm going to darken some lines for those that are of darker value, but when you are darkening the lines for the branches, please pay attention to the fact that the top part of the branches are covered with snow, so that's the lightest value. So the top outline of those branches, don't apply too dark of a pencil line because then it will show through the watercolor. So only darken the bottom part of those branches. So we're done with the pencil sketching, and now we are going to apply a little bit masking fluid for the snow. Apparently, we're not going to cover everything because that's just unnatural. I'm only going to preserve the snow in areas that is difficult to leave out while painting. So I'm only going to apply masking fluid for these small spot of snow that is on this branch close to the bird and the snow that's in front of the bird. Other parts of the snow which are on all those branches are easier to leave out when we are painting. The masking fluid is not completely dry, so now I'm making a mixture for the background using ultramarine blue and a little bit burnt sienna to tone it down a little bit. I am using a 12 by 16 inch paper, so I need a lot of mixture to cover the paper. And you don't have to mix your mixture at this stage. I'm just saving time while waiting. So the masking fluid is completely dry. Now I'm going to wet both sides of the paper because I want the paper to stay moist the whole time in order to achieve that soft halo-y effect for the distant trees. Now the paper is wet and adhered to my gator board, I am going to use a clean paper towel to dry the part of the bird and the main branches, because when I apply the background color, I don't want it to flow into the bird because currently the paper is very wet. Now all the preparation is done, so we're going to paint the background. I am using a hockey brush and picking up some pure ultramarine blue and directly going in, starting from the top left corner. And while I'm applying the paint, I'm also leaving out some circular gaps, trying to mimicking that blurry effect of distant objects when they're out of focus. Here I'm approaching a branch that is covered with snow, so I'm being more careful and leaving that white without brushing over it. So basically we're going to repeat this for the rest of the painting. Just be careful when you're approaching the snow on branches and then leave them out best as you can. But if you accidentally covered it with paint, you can always rescue it later because we're using lifting colors. Since the branches themselves are darker than the background, you can go over them with this blue paint at this stage. When the paper is still wet, if you accidentally brush ultramarine blue somewhere you don't want it to be, then you can easily remove it with a paper towel. But here, for the wings of the cardinal, actually it is okay to have ultramarine here because it will be very dark. So I actually went back and put in some ultramarine blue here. Now I'm switching to a round brush and using the same mixture just for some smaller areas. Now switching back to a big hockey brush, and I'm picking up the dark mixture made of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and I'm going to deepen certain parts of the background. I'm not sure whether you can see, but I'm very lightly brushing over the paper. So for the top left corner of the background, I'm actually adding a little bit more burnt sienna to the dark mixture so that it can appear a little bit brighter and lighter and warmer. So by adjusting the ratios of burnt sienna to ultramarine blue, you can adjust the temperature of this dark mixture so that certain parts of the background can look cooler and darker and certain are a bit brighter. Currently, I think the background is a little bit too light in certain parts, especially when it's adjacent to the snow. In order for the white snow to pop out, we need to place it against some dark background. So now I'm deepening certain areas with the same mixture. Now I'm using a clean damp brush to rescue some white parts that was lost in the process of painting. Now I take a look at the background and I think it is just still too light. So I'm going in with a much thicker mixture with French ultramarine blue and apply it wet in wet. As you can see, once this darker color is applied, the white is much more prominent. And if your Hake brush splits into strands and leave marks, it's okay because the paper is still quite damp, so the color will blend, so the streaks will be less prominent. And also at this stage, if you have some lines in the background, it can help because those might be the distant tree branches. So I wouldn't try to smooth it out. Now I'm happy with how dark the background is, and I am going to retrieve the whites of branches, not only the main ones, but also those a little bit further in the distance. And I'm using the same technique, which is to use a clean damp brush and to lift paint off the paper so that it looks like snow-covered branches in distance. How much you can lift off the paper depends to a large extent on how wet your paper is. If the paper is very wet, once you remove a line of paint, then the surrounding paint will kind of rush into that. So the line will disappear by a lot. So you need to find the right moment when the paper is not that wet. And also, even if the white line is not that obvious, it's okay because we don't want it to be very prominent anyway. The focal point is the bird and the branches in front. Remember to clean the brush constantly and dry it with the kitchen towel. So the same thing here when we are lifting out these small branches, we want them not to be too parallel to each other. So they go in different directions, they're in different lengths so that it looks more natural and lively. Now we're going to paint the branches. So I am using a mixture made of burnt sienna and a little bit ultramarine blue to make a dark brown color. And initially I was using a regular brush, but then I found that it is a little bit too thin for these thicker branches. So I switched to a round brush. In painting these snow-covered branches, please notice that the shape of the snow is uneven. So make sure the shape of the branches that is not covered are also not uneven. So some parts it's a little bit wider and some parts a little bit thinner. When you are painting the branches with masking fluid, then you have to pay attention to where the branches are in relation to the snow so that it make sense logically. For those branches that we lifted it out earlier, we can also paint its branch part, but remember to use a slightly lighter paint so that it looks like it's further in distance. Now I'm using a clean damp brush to soften some areas between the branch and the snow. I can do this because the paint of the branch is still wet or damp. Another way of achieving a softer edge is to apply some clean water on the surface of the branch first, and then go in with the color of the branch. Here I picked up some green color on my palette to kind of lighten the color of the branches because I see in the reference photo that this branch has a light green tone. It's really not important. I think you can also use burnt umber or other earth colors if you want some variations in the color of the branch. I'm using a thicker paint to kind of darken the bottom parts of the branch so that it looks more 3D. By pressing down and lifting up the tip of the brush, you can make the brush strokes in different width. So try to do this when you are painting the branches instead of, constantly using the tip of the brush to kind of widen the branches. For the distant small branches, I am mainly using raw umber to paint them. As they are also covered with snow on top, so paint the lines underneath the white lines. Vary the intensity of the color here and there, so there are variations. Hold the brush further away from the tip. I think that helps your wrist to be more flexible and make more lively brush strokes. Try it. The paint I'm using here is a very light raw umber because that's where the sun is the strongest in the background, so it should be light. I think that's enough branches for the painting. Now we're finally gonna paint the cardinal. For the cardinal, I am mainly going to use cadmium red for its body. And the paper is becoming dry, so I am mixing a very thick mixture of cadmium red. And because if the mixture is too wet, then it might cause background and create cauliflowers. And I don't want that. As you can see, when I press the entire body of the brush to paint the belly of the bird, there's some gaps. I am not going to brush in color to completely cover it because I think that's cool texture that can be interpreted as snow that caught on its belly or it's falling down from the sky. To darken the red, I use two ways. First is to darken with alizarin crimson if it's just a kind of a deeper red. And if it's close to black, then I'm using a green because green is the complementary color of red. So when they mix together, they create black. The paint is quite dry, so it's leaving a lot of gaps. So I'm just using a clean damp brush to smooth out some areas. And now I'm picking up alizarin crimson to darken certain parts of the bird. The two transparent greens in my palette are Windsor Green and Viridian. I think either one works, and sometimes when I'm in the middle of painting, I just dip into both of them because I wasn't paying too much attention. And the reason why I'm using transparent greens is because they can darken the red much better than semi-opaque or opaque greens. Now I'm continuing with the tail. When you make this kind of dry brush stroke, it's actually nice to have this texture because they look like the feather more, I think. Now I'm going to paint the shadow of the cardinal on the snow. So I'm first wetting the surface of the paper, and then I'm going with some pure ultramarine blue. Now I'm picking up some burnt sienna, a little bit dirty color on the palette, and I'm going to paint the bird's feet. Now I see that the shape of the belly doesn't make sense here, so I'm just going in with cadmium red and adjust it. Now the bird is done. We are going to adjust the details. Wait for the paper to be completely dry and first remove all the masking fluid. And then I'm going to adjust the shapes of these white spots reserved by the masking fluid because now they look a little bit unnatural. So I'm using a clean damp brush, and this is a synthetic one. Its hair is much stiffer, so it's better to use it to remove paint when the paper is dry. So basically I'm trying to scrub the paint off the paper and then dab it with a clean paper towel. And I'm just going to repeat the process until I'm satisfied with the softness of the edge of these white spots. Now I'm going to adjust some branches. So I'm picking up the color mixture for branches I used earlier, and I am going to adjust the shape of these branches so that they make more sense logically. You can also adjust the shape of the snow by wetting the surface of the paper and then going in with the background colors so you can adjust the shape of it. When you're adjusting details right now, you're kind of scrutinizing your own painting. So it is very easy to fall into a rabbit hole and just want to adjust everything. So right now you can step away from the painting and look at it from a distance and see what adjustment is necessary so that you know when to stop. I'm satisfied with the painting now, so this is the final result. Hope you like my video, and please don't forget to click like and subscribe.